For those of you who've been living in a cave, there was a whole big issue involving the government wanting to have the right and policies being enacted to shut down websites based on complaints with no due process and all this stuff in order to stop online piracy, right? Now, let me just say at the outset, it was interesting to hear Bill Maher say the other day, and he's been taking immense amount of flack for it, by the way, that he feels like he's been getting ripped off personally. His movie, I can't pronounce it, it's ridiculous and religious combined. Religious. I can't say it, Ben. Neither can you, so don't try to say it either. He says he's personally being ripped off, and so he kind of favored this and caught a lot of people off guard because it's so draconian that even if you feel like you need protection for copyright infringement, that's not the way to do it. And then when the whole thing was, pulled back and basically, they didn't vote on it because even the sponsors started retreating from it because many websites and whatnot, Wikipedia went down for the day to protest it and all this. The next day, the government shuts down a file sharing site. And the guy who runs it is a German guy living in New Zealand. You've probably heard of all this. So again, I'm not going to give you all the background because it's going to be a long show, it looks like already. The point was, and Glenn Greenwald pointed this out in a column, the point was that it was almost like the government saying, we don't need your stinking SOPA law. We can do this now. And it's the same thing that they said when it came to whether or not they had the powers to illegally detain people or whatnot. The government's basically telling you, we don't need these laws. We have the power already. Now, I'd like to say that we're getting ripped off by people who are illegally. I go to sites all the time. There was one in Serbia or something that was putting our shows out, some pirate site. And, like an idiot, I write them and say, hey, listen, could you take those shows down? We're just independent people, trying to make a living. And they basically gave me the finger back and said, what are you going to do about it? Okay, listen, we understand. It's a new world. I don't think you're going to be able to fix that world, though, the way that these people are trying to fix it. It looks to me more like a power grab on the internet so that the government can shut down anything that they don't like. More on this in a second, because Chris Dodd's comments, he's a former senator who's now lobbying for Hollywood and everything over this deal. And Hollywood is really, really pushing for something that will allow them to essentially give the death penalty to websites anywhere in the world if there are allegations that they are facilitating copyright infringement. And it would affect everyone, including yours truly. I have a message board. We talk to you about the discussion board all the time, right? If somebody posts something on there, and we have 13,000 registered members, I can't watch all that. But basically, the way that the law was written, the government could shut down my message board and my website on an allegation alone for something I couldn't possibly police, right? And we got 13,000 people. Look at YouTube. Look at all those things. It's insane, right? We're part of this new media thing. Bloggers, podcasters, independent music artists. Remember what Radiohead did not that long ago where they put out a song for free and then basically said, give them what you think it's worth? Well, that's what we do too. That's what these bloggers who put the donate button on their page do. That's our business plan. Now, will this work? That has yet to be seen. I would just suggest that, can you imagine us trying to go to all these pirate... Can you imagine us going to the government saying this, the Serbian pirate website's ripping us off? Would you shut them down, please? Something else will spring up later. Some direct file. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think you can stop it. And I think you end up looking like bad guys for trying to and to be so heavy-handed. It's an old business model. The business model that says, I've got this thing in my hand, and if you give me money in my left hand, I will then hand over in my right hand what I won't give you otherwise. That's the ancient, age-old business model, right? What we're trying to do is see if basically giving you away free stuff and then saying, pay us what you think it's worth will work. We sell the old shows, but, again, that's an honor system, whether you pay for them or not. People can go rip us off if they want to. We basically try to say, look, I work in a paint-infested studio in my house. It's just me and the invisible white rabbit doing these programs. If you like them and you want us to keep doing them, give us something, and you do. I think we're seeing a transitional form of commerce here. Can it work? That has yet to be seen. But even though we're getting ripped off too, certainly nowhere near to the degree that a Bill Maher, and certainly nothing like what Hollywood's dealing with or the music industry, I feel like we are a laboratory. All these bloggers out there are laboratories. All the other podcasters are laboratories. These independent music artists and the radio head and all these people, we're seeing if this can work. And so far, we're here. I mean, we're still here, folks. I'll tell you something else, too. I went around to about 20 experts a couple of years ago and asked them if this business model would work. Every single one of them told me it wouldn't. They said you cannot ask people to give you money for something that's free. They will not do it. Now, that is exactly what all the big content providers feel. And they may be right for themselves. But ladies and gentlemen, you're helping to show that at least for some people, that model works. I'll give you my stuff for free, and you come back and you throw some coins in my hat if you think it was worth it. So my opinion on all this copyright infringement stuff is that what they're trying to do to address the problem is worse than the problem itself and makes the people who make the stuff that's being infringed upon look like they're borderline evil. Now, that's not the part that interested me the most, though. A lot of people said, what's your opinion on this, Dan? Forget that. The part I like is Chris Dodd. Because this, in my opinion, goes to the root of the problems in our governmental system, which to me is always more important than the individual things like copyright infringement. For those of you who don't remember, Christopher Dodd actually ran for the Democratic nomination for president against Barack Obama, right? Always portraying himself as a champion of the people and liberal causes and whatnot. He was a long-time serving senator from Connecticut who promised not to go into lobbying when he left government and, of course, instantly went into lobbying. He's the chief lobbyist for Hollywood and all these, copyright interest people. And he said something interesting. Well, actually, he said several interesting things when the whole SOPA thing got pulled back. The first interesting thing he said was that, well, I have to read this story to you because there's so many interesting aspects. Let me just put it this way. The bottom line is that there is a petition at whitehouse.gov that more than 10,000 people have already signed saying that Dodd should be investigated for this, for essentially bribery. And what's more is Dodd made it even more obvious when he basically warned the legislators who backed out of this deal that, listen, you were given money for this. We're not going to give you any money again if you don't deliver next time. Let me read you a little bit of this piece. Wikipedia is one of the sites that went dark in protest of the SOPA legislation. And I don't know about you, but as a guy who makes a living off of listener donations, I feel a little compelled to sometimes, take that money and give it to other places. I donate to Wikipedia. Here's the story, and this particular one that I like appeared on a smaller website news-wise. It's called Web Pro News, but it's all over the internet. Let me read you a little of this. It's by Josh Wolford, appeared January 24th, 2012. Quote, speaking at the DLD conference in Munich this morning, Wikipedia's Jimmy Wales didn't mince words on the subject of former senator and current MPAA, that's basically the Hollywood Motion Picture Association that governs all these things, didn't mince words on the subject of former senator and current MPAA chairman Chris Dodd. He said that Dodd should be fired. Wales and Dodd, the story said, have been arguing at opposite ends of the SOPA-PIPA battle. That's the two pieces of legislation. More generally, the argument covers differences in opinion regarding how to deal with the perceived threat of online piracy. In response to SOPA and PIPA, Wales led the charge of protesting by blacking out Wikipedia for 24 hours last Wednesday. SOPA and PIPA, the two pieces of legislation that Dodd and the MPAA support, have been put on the back burner as the House and Senate have delayed action, respectively. Dodd, the story says, has been critical of the shelving of both SOPA and PIPA, even calling the massive internet SOPA blackout led by Wikipedia an abuse of power. Wales addressed this at the DLD conference. This is Wales talking now. Quote, 10 million people contacted Congress, Wales said. That's not an abuse of power. That's democracy. Dodd had best get used to it. End quote. The story continues. According to comments made as part of Sundance's Cinema Cafe series, it looks like Dodd is softening his rhetoric when it comes to the internet protest that seemed to have had such an impact on congressional action on SOPA. From The Hollywood Reporter, quote, "It's a watershed event, what happened," Dodd admitted, noting that opponents' quote, "ability to organize and communicate directly with consumers was a game-changing phenomenon that he hadn't seen in more than 3 decades in public office." Dodd, the story says, seemed to have a sense of humor about the recent beating he's taken as a spokesman for the mainstream entertainment industry, the kind of chaos that the former senator had hoped to leave behind when he left office in January 2011. Quote, "Up until a week ago, I thought it was a pretty good decision," he joked, but the message Dodd most seemed to want to get across was that, quote, "the white noise has made it impossible to have a conversation about this," he said. "We've got to find a better way to have that conversation than we have in the last 2 weeks," end quote. The story continues. In no way is Dodd backing off his support for legislation like SOPA, but at least he's recognized the power of collective internet protest. As you probably know, the story says, Dodd has been under fire recently for some comments he made on Fox News. Here are the comments he made. Quote, "Candidly, those who count on, quote, Hollywood for support need to understand that this industry is watching very carefully who's going to stand up for them when their job is at stake. Don't ask me to write a check for you," meaning for a legislator, "when you think your job is at risk, and then don't pay any attention to me when my job is at stake. I would caution people," Dodd said, "don't make the assumption that because the, quote, Hollywood community has been historically supportive of Democrats, which they have, don't make the false assumption this year that because we did it in past years, we will do it this year. These issues before us, this is the only issue that goes right to the heart of the industry," end quote. The story finishes off by saying, "The gist here is that Congress needs to remember who writes the checks and needs to fall in line with their interests. These comments are obviously teeming with hints of corruption, so much so that an online petition at the White House petition site has been started asking for an investigation of Dodd and the MPAA for bribery." The story says the signatures currently number more than 25,000 and has hit the threshold to warrant a White House response, end quote. Okay, a couple of things here, first of all. One, this is out-and-out corruption, folks, and Dodd is saying it in a way that you don't normally hear, which is either you fall in line with what we're contributing to you or we're not contributing anymore. A long time ago, folks, the court said that the threshold for corruption in this country is quid pro quo. In other words, you need to be able to show that you did something you would not have otherwise done because of the money that was given to you. Generally, in the past, legislators have tried to be really careful about this. It shows you the level of corruption we exist in now, governmentally speaking, that care is no longer taken because no one gets punished. Now, couple of things. One, Christopher Dodd is never going to be investigated for bribery. You know why? Because this will open the door up to everything else. You don't think Christopher Dodd has the power to go nuclear in this whole thing and expose all these people? What's more, President Obama, he's not going to come out and do anything either. What's more, if you think this is an online internet protest that got the job done, you're mistaken. One, these people are going to do this behind closed doors or as part of a rider to some other bill. Or, as we said earlier, they kind of went in and shut the mega upload site the very next day as a way of saying, we don't need that bill. We can shut these people down now under current law. If they look into this as bribery, folks, it will split the whole, system wide open. You will then expose all kinds of bribery. President Obama may get up there with his new populist stance and make a couple of words about how we need to find some middle ground between, creative people and their rights to own things and internet freedom, and then go ahead and do whatever they want to do. I love the fact that Dodd identifies as part of the problem the ability of people like Wikipedia and the other sites that went dark to go directly to the consumers. In other words, Dodd can't stand that all of a sudden the internet is allowing a level of democracy that's making his job as a lobbyist much more difficult. Now, lest you think, and I've had this conversation with many of you, lest you think, folks, that this is some groundswell revolution that the average Joes and Janes online were able to, to make themselves, it's not. Now, obviously, millions of people were roped into this whole thing and told to call their congressmen and senators, and it made a difference, but it wouldn't have made a difference had it not been one giant segment of industry facing off against another. And we've told you before that, folks, when it's us begging for one of our constitutional rights, it means nothing. But sometimes you will get a battle over things like that pit one great industry against another, and then you stand a chance. In other words, normally this would be Hollywood and the music industry and everything just steamrolling any opposition. If you or I or a bunch of regular citizens tried to do this, forget it. Doesn't work. But folks, this is Hollywood against Silicon Valley. There are powerful interests who also donate a lot of money on the other side too. That's when, the corruption in the system can occasionally work to our advantage if the side we would like to win is playing a role in the corruption too. There's many legislators who are getting money from the other side. And then one side was able to go directly to the consumer and enlist their help too. And that's what Dodd was talking about. Dang, it wasn't just money versus money. It was money on one side and money plus consumers on the other, and that tipped the scale. I told you what's going to happen, folks. One, they're just going to pass whatever they need without as much fanfare. Two, they already can do whatever they want, as proven time and again. But Christopher Dodd should be investigated for bribery, and it's not going to happen because it would open Pandora's box as far as our legislators are concerned. But what the heck, go sign the online petition anyway.